Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Iron Canon podcast, your home on the Star Wars Underworld podcast network for in-depth discussion on the lore, the High Republic, and the whole canon of the galaxy far, far away. My name is Matthew. I'm coming to you from Underworld North Studio here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. As always, I'm joined across the continent in Underworld, Orange County, your friend and mine, Mr. Joel Davis. Joel, how are you doing this week?
I'm good, but I realized we're in the wrong section. Here, let me fix that. There we go.
That's
That's
fine.
that's how it is supposed to be. I have the OC.
All right.
I'm kidding. But I could fix it. Easy fix. But I'm doing good. Doing good. I got a little bit of a sunlight glare. I'm gonna try to sit back. It'll go away by later in the day because the sun goes down.
That's fair. Pretty soon, maybe in a month or so. I mean, it's light out pretty late.
I know, it's very nice.
Now. Daylight. We saved the daylight, guys.
I know. We did it. We did beat the darkness.
I don't know that. We waged war on it. We need to to a dark line of thought that'll carry us. Because this week, we're talking about war. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing.
Say it again, y'all.
Or is it a last resort, defending the vulnerable in the face of unspeakable evil? Sorry, feint-of-hand by corrupt despots seeking to distract an embittered populace? Other word salads that I'm going to use throughout this episode? A compelling fictional narrative, enabling those removed from any real-world military engagement to suspend our moral disbelief. It's probably that one, actually. Why is it called Star Wars when it's clearly not pro-war? So we're diving into tonight. It's gonna be fun. It's going to be an intellectual one, I hope. Classic Iron Canon
The Adventures of Luke Starkiller in the Journal of the Wills is a very long and not very marketable title.
Yeah, so Star Wars.
It doesn't fit on the cups.
There we go. There we go. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads at Iron Canon Pod. EYEONCANONPOD. Here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel, we've got YouTube memberships. We've got super chats. We've got comments galore. Check us out in the comment section. Type it in. Type away. We'll get to it, especially if you super chat us. Then we'll definitely get to it. Also, Discord, Star Wars Underworld Discord server. The link right below in the description. Go in there, chat it up, say hi, tag Joel, ask a comment, ask a question, ask a comment, say a question, ask a question, say a comment, whatever. Post your favorite Star Wars thing or your Star Trek thing. There's a Star Trek channel, there's a Marvel channel, there's a whole bunch of things. Even posted an article on Star Trek that I read in the Star Trek channel. So there we go. It's like, where am I going to go? Where am I going to post this? Where am I going to share this to the world? I've read this thing. Want to go share it and start a conversation, and the conversation didn't really take off. But don't worry, there's lots of conversations going on in the Discord, including what were you guys up to this past week?
Yes, last week we had a very special episode, special event, not episode. Yeah. Well, I guess kind of episodic. A special event in the Discord. We watched a certain film called from the 1970s called American Graffiti. It was directed by this up-and-comer named George Lucas. Probably not going anywhere. He's just making stories about cars. American Graffiti. One of George's only pre-Star Wars movies is on Netflix. I've always wanted to see it because I never know what it's about. I just know it has Ron Howard and Harrison Ford, and there's cars because George loves cars. And it's a good, interesting movie about the 50s and kids growing up and leaving home and driving and racing and all that good stuff.
And so you guys there's a channel where you guys just go in there and chat, and you have it on Netflix. And
we go to the movie night screening room, and then Ben will stream it on Discord, and we'll watch it. And we have always fun. I've always wanted to see that movie.
Yeah, I found it was his first experiment in what I like to call contrapuntal storytelling. That's a music term, but just telling 3 or 4 different storylines at the same time, all kind of having equal weight. And that was interesting. And he pulled it off then, and then he pulled it off especially in Empire and Return of the Jedi, but also in New Hope to some extent. Definitely pulled that off. Speaking of contrapuntal storytelling, I take it to the Phantom Menace on May 3rd. Looking forward to that.
Nice. Tell me, when you see that, tell us all what the audience is like. Like, what's the general mood? I'm very curious to see. I mean, I can't imagine someone hating the film buying it. Although in today's day and age, you never know trolls. But I'm sure it's like I'm be curious to see like if your audience got all pumped, excited, and going
Yeah.
woo during the moments.
I'm going May 3rd or May 4th. One of those. Yeah, I'm going May 3rd. I suspect it's going to be excited, but also I suspect you're going to have to tell someone to turn their phone off or all that. It happens every time. Whether or not they like the movie. I will get into a bit of about prequelism in a minute in my week in Star Wars. But before I do that, factor being comics are for Wednesdays. Wednesdays are for comics. Over order. I say that in every Wednesdays right here on the Star Wars Underworld YouTube channel and everywhere else you get your podcasts. Chris Abbott and I talk about the day's comic books, Star Wars comic books. Trying to remember last week we talked about was it Darth Vader number 45, which was a special one, a special issue. Also the insider short story, quasi insider short story, just in the collected edition by George Mann, Missing Pieces. Yeah, I think there's only Mace Windu is coming up this week, I believe. Mace Windu number 3. Could be wrong about that, but yeah. So definitely check us out 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, right here, wherever you're watching. Don't need to go anywhere. Just like and subscribe and follow, etc. And you'll get it there. Of course, the flagship on Thursday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. They're going to be discussing Bad Batch and news and all the stuff that they do. That'll be fun. That'll be a good time as well. And of course, Tales from Beyond the Galaxy and Hannah doing her thing every day on her own channel, on the Rayside channel. Check out the Star Wars Underworld Podcast Network. We're one big happy fandom fam. All right. This week in Star Wars, take it away, Joel.
Yes. This week in Star Wars. So I've been doing a lot of thinking lately, some stinking Star Wars thinking. I'll say. There's a lot of Star Wars movies we've gotten where I don't really care about having quote unquote the George Lucas version of it. I don't need the George Lucas version of Rogue One. I don't need the George Lucas version of Solo.
I don't even know what that word means. I'll be honest.
That just means the version of the story that George Lucas would have written and directed.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Like, if George Lucas had written Solo, maybe, I don't know, like Solo's last name would have been like Solo Steen. And then that's why he called Solo, because he takes out the Stein. I don't know. Something like that. What? Or I agree. I mean, like the George Lucas sequels, like we know that version's out there somewhere.
Sure.
Or at least the outline is. So, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah.
If there is one thing about a version of a Star Wars film that we're having coming up, which I honestly kind of like, maybe not like would have liked to see George's version of, but I would have been tempted to a lot more to see George's version of. It kind of is the Dawn of the Jedi film, because I'm like, okay, out of all the stories Star Wars is telling, you're going to tell, hopefully, pray, coming up, this one's kind of important because it's kind of the origin of Star Wars. It's the origin of the Jedi Order, maybe, or Dawn of the Force, or whatever. I mean, I don't know if by the end they're like, the guy's going to go, and now we shall make a Jedi Order. Cut credits. But, it is kind of the origins of all of this stuff. And, I've always said if Star Wars is going to go beyond the story of the Skywalkers, I always say that if there's one constant of Star Wars, it's the Jedi are that constant. So I would, I would have been interested to see George's version of like, how did the Jedi Order start up? What are his ideas? What were his notes? And obviously, I don't need, Lucasfilm to tell Mangold, hey, you got to put this in the movie because we demand it. But I do wonder if during the story meetings and all the prep work for this, they're talking to Mangold and his co-writer, the Andor guy, which is that also really cool. And they're like, hey, these are some notes from George in the archives we have about the Dawn of the Jedi, and with some little things he wrote here and there about what he thought the Jedi Order, how they started and whatnot, and maybe could you find ways to incorporate this stuff into the film? And I don't see why Mangold, if he could find a way, would go, sure, why not? I'm sure they're giving him stuff. Like, I know, for example, Matthew Stover apparently told a lot of stuff about like the origins of the Jedi Sith War that he apparently under NDA for. He still can't talk
Really?
about for, and
Wow.
he put it in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, or like he had that in his head when we put in the Revenge of the Sith novelization from
Mhm.
George himself. So we know George has like put some thought into this stuff. So I do wonder if, when Mangold's writing this film, if like
Mhm.
was he given privy to access to things in the vaults at Lucasfilm that even we're not aware exist, and they'll probably not say because they always keep all the cool
Sure.
behind the scenes stuff secret. But I'll be very curious. And again, it is kind of like, well, if there were one version of George's of these movies that I would like to have seen a George version of, or
Mhm.
so it would have been the Dawn of the Jedi, because again, this is kind of a big one. This is kind of the origin of Star Wars in a lot of
Yeah.
sense. But yeah, that's just sort of
Yeah.
where my
Alright.
brain was thinking about this particular film, which I hope happens. But let's just,
Yeah.
for the sake of argument, say going to. So
Yeah. I'm with you in definitely being curious to know
Mhm,
what George's idea was, obviously. What he thought, you know.
mhm,
And just knowing how he thinks, he's probably thought it out and had an idea that sort of informed things later on, just like
mhm.
I'm copying too. It's contagious, just like with Darth Bane, right? I mean,
Right.
everything that went into the Phantom Menace, he wrote it down, gave it to Drew Karpyshyn.
Actually, he gave
Here
it
you go.
to the Phantom Menace novelization guy first.
Oh, gave it to Terry Brooks,
Yeah.
and then fair enough, but then Drew Karpyshyn ran with it. Oh, sorry, we're both coughing here. Wait,
Yeah.
um, I will say I'm sure maybe Mangold was given the option. I
Mhm,
don't know. I don't know if he was told outright, because I think I wouldn't want it. I think I wouldn't want it at first, knowing maybe my own creative process, my own writing process.
mhm.
Uh, for example, I haven't, I don't look at Bad Batch reviews. I don't look at reviews of other things before I give my own. I want to be able to just give my own unfiltered what I actually think about it, and then hear what other people think. Um, with him, just in terms of if I'm writing something, I tend to want to think of what I think first, and then put it out, and then see what other people have said.
Mhm.
Try and just make sure the creative juices are flowing, because I do find other people's comments can just steer me in a certain direction and get my mind going in a certain direction. It's why I'm so spoiler averse, for example. I want to just have a clear thing. So maybe with Mangold, maybe he would give him the option if he was struggling for ideas, which I doubt, but or if he wants to maybe in a detail, how would this connect to that? Maybe to see how Lucas had thought of it. I don't know. I mean, that'd be an interesting thing. That's the kind of thing they might share in a behind the scenes thing. It's not controversial,
I mean, for
but
me, it's all about
yeah.
like, yeah, like I'm sure, like if it's something like George had written down, the first Jedi's name was
Yeah.
Jed. Jed. Like I doubt that's something Mango's like, yeah, I'm not gonna call the first Jedi Jed. But if I know, but it's like
That's canon now.
that's kid. His name was Jed. That's why we call it
That's
the
why.
Jedi Order, because it's about this guy named Jed.
That's
Uh,
funny.
um, but
Yeah.
I do wonder, obviously, I mean, obviously, if they think they got a better idea, they can run with it. But it's like George
Mhm.
was like, the Jedi, they start out, as like, these kind of just monks on an island, you see, and
Yeah.
then they kind of discovered this power and learned through goodness and kindness that
Yeah.
about lifting rocks, kind of keep that thematic cohesion going, like
Right.
I do think at in some point there is like a limit to how far I can go. Like what if one like I don't think they'll ever say like, well, actually the Jedi secretly were evil the whole time.
Right.
The Sith were actually the good guy, but then
There are
eventually
people who
reversed.
want that. People who
I
want that
know.
to happen.
And I feel like that's gonna be like, no, we
Yeah.
gotta honor George's back lore here at least a little bit. Um, we can't go that far.
I
And I
mean,
do want
that's honoring the story, the saga itself we have already, right?
that too. So yeah,
Yeah.
like, and I do think, unlike, I do think when it comes to these big IPs like Star
Mhm.
Wars, I'm not saying Mango's gonna be forced to like you have to adhere to this idea, but unless they really don't like what he's delivering, which I doubt, because Mangold's a pretty good, talented guy on his
Mhm.
own, and his co-writer, obviously, we know is a good, talented guy on his
True.
own. So got two talented folks, but at the same time, Lucasfilm is collaborative. They're the reason why.
True.
Tony Gilroy, who we all say isn't a Star Wars fan. He had to it. He actually pulled from a lot of Star Wars lore, and he can't change that much about the
Yeah.
era he's working in, right? He can't say Andor's fighting the Galactic Kingdom under King Sheev. So there is a certain
Yeah.
amount of you have to kind of give
Mhm.
and kind of like, here are some things about the world that we kind of already have secretly established, but we just haven't shown
Mhm.
off yet. But the rest you can work with.
Yeah.
So I do wonder if in terms of like their internal world building at Star Wars, if there are like, here are some of
Yeah.
George's notes that we kind of still want to adhere to when making this. But everything else, like, you don't have to
Yeah.
call the first Jedi named Jed.
No. I
Man.
mean, I'm wondering. So a few things. So because this is you mentioned Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith
Yeah.
novelization. There's also, of course, the Legends comic by John Ostrander that I'm looking up on Wikipedia. I've read that.
Mhm.
I forgot to mention that. Yeah, I wonder. I wonder how much of George's ideas are in that versus, say, what the canon version will be of that.
Well,
But what my point being is,
mhm.
you can be more upfront about that with paper, but with screen, they're paying more to let these creatives have their own say, and so yeah, it's a
I
bit
mean,
of a thing. But yeah, maybe yeah. Again, I think Mangold might have been given the option, whereas Ostrander was the original. Here are George's notes. Just again, like I mentioned, we mentioned Terry Brooks and then Drew Karpyshyn.
I mean, that's true. I mean, the thing with the Dawn of the Jedi one that's kind of the odd man out compared to everything else is like, you know, George. It's like George didn't really have a sequel until he started to actually make one several years ago. This is the
Mm.
Dawn of the Jedi. This is sort of the
Yeah,
if there's one story where I feel like you can't get lazy on us,
sure.
this would be it. I mean, not
Yeah.
that I don't want bad Star Wars throughout the board, but it's like, this is kind of an important one. This is like, I don't want to like
Yeah.
be all like, if they don't do it this way, it's gonna be like the prequel and it sucks, blah 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 blah. But it's sort of like, this is kind of a very important thing in Star Wars. This is the thing this is what Star Wars is. If Star Wars is anything, it's the Jedi. That's what makes
Yeah.
Star Wars stand out from everything else. It's Jedi and the Force. So like, I do wonder if like they gotta have. I mean, they probably. I'm sure Mangold's given support. That's what
Yeah.
I'll end
Oh,
it with.
sure. Yeah. I think what more deeply you're getting at is, like you said, is this going to adhere to George's values that he injected with Star Wars, right?
Right.
Is he going to adhere to, yeah, like what George in the films that he made and were involved with
Mhm.
had set up who the Jedi are,
Right.
and is it going to be true that DNA? And so, and that's why we're curious about what story he had developed, maybe or maybe not, to express that DNA, right? Just like, for example, in Clone Wars season 6 with the Yoda arc and
Right.
the force thing at the center of the galaxy. What are the weird timely wimely thing going on there? Jeremy Remy thing going on there. Not quite time travel, but in terms of just goopily light arts cloning, not quite cloning, but you know what I mean.
Force magic.
Force
More
magic.
stuff.
Yeah.
Called-
That was George telling a
Yeah.
story to express. I mean, I'm guessing that was a George idea. It's a George
Oh
Lucas
yeah.
idea. So
And also, and I'll just say one more thing. When it comes to these big IPs, you're never just locked in a room and like, here you go,
No.
think of something. You are given materials and notes and like source books and guides and stuff
Yeah.
like that. You kind of have you are kind of like, you can't, as much as they are given freedom, but it's like, even they have a line. Like, they
Again, I
are.
think they're giving those as an option to look at.
Oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like they could say, here's a stack of books, here's a stack of whatever's.
Mhm.
Go with what you want. It's not like what's his name? Joss Whedon saying, here's the Avenger. It's like, and that's the thing, Marvel, for example, is more directly an adaptation of those things. So That's a bit of a different example. But even then, Civil War. Here's the original Civil War comic by, I guess is it McNiven? I forget who it is. He did the art for it. Brian Michael Bendis. Here's the Civil War comic.
Mm-hmm.
You're gonna make this a Captain America movie. It's gonna be, take your pick about what you hear Kevin Feige. Even there, take your pick about what you adapt and what you do differently.
And Mangold has just a lot of more wiggle room to explore.
Yeah.
Like, he got 25,000
Sure.
years. He doesn't have to worry about, like, okay, this takes place in between A New Hope and Revenge of the Sith. So it's like, we got to have Stormtroopers somewhere. They have to exist, technically.
Yeah.
So it's like, he's got a lot more room to do some world building of his own if he wants.
Yeah.
But yeah,
so
that's just something I think about.
Yeah, good spur on for conversation there. We gotta move on ahead. I got two. First off, I have started John Jackson Miller's The Living Force. There's the poster. You can barely see it, but trust me, I moved the poster down. I got that at New York Comic Con. Yeah, I'm in it. I'm loving it. It's getting at all the things I find interesting about the Jedi and the relationship with the Republic, and especially in this time when everything's about to go south, and how we know everything's about to go south. And interesting the contrast with the High Republic era and how the relationship was so much easier back then, so much more flexible. The relationship between the Jedi and the Republic was more flexible and less concerned, I should say. And just how clearly the Jedi were out and about in the galaxy, so much more present to various parts of the galaxy. They're John Jackson Miller. This is definitely very clearly, very consciously written with the High Republic in mind. You can tell already. One thing I thought about, and this is a different topic, but different aspect of this novel. I was thinking about Qui-Gon's character. I've only finished up to the first part. Qui-Gon he's taken on, just, and this I'm putting on like my for Christ's sake Anakin hat here, theology time hat here. He's taken on different figures, different sort of connections. In of course in the Phantom Menace, he's John the Baptist. He sees the chosen one. He points him out. Says, "Here he is. The time is now." In Master and Apprentice, he's a bit more of a prophet who's denouncing. This is connected to the Living Force, but denouncing, the ways the Jedi and the Republic of, especially on this planet. Of I forget what it's called. With the Checker Corporation, just letting them take over this planet. In this one, he makes me think more of Francis of Assisi, where he encounters these families on this ship. They're in trouble. They're fleeing just the chaos of piracy because the Jedi and the Republic basically abandoned them. It's basically hut space at this point. They're fleeing. He wants to be compassionate and close to them. But he also has to go to the Jedi Council, and he is respectful. He is, he plays the game. These are his colleagues, his fellow masters, but he's telling them, get off your butts here. Go actually pay attention to what's happening on the ground. And I can kind of see him even in the brown robe a little bit. And just saying,
well, he wears the brown robe in Phantom Menace.
He wears the brown robe. There we go. So, because we have this weird image of Francis of Assisi where we think he's the kindly, soft, gentle character, and he is that to some extent. I mean, he talks to animals. That's the tradition. But he had to go talk to the Pope. He had to talk to powerful people, and tell them, and be embody change. Embody the change you want to see in the world. And so I see Qui-Gon really going out and doing that and trying to move the order and save the order from itself a little bit. And so yeah, that was interesting. I don't know what have you thought of Living Force so far?
Oh, I've enjoyed it. I really like the depictions of the various council members and how they're all kind of different. Like, were you surprised that Mace Windu was actually more gung-ho about exploring than all the others?
I don't know.
I've been a little more on Qui-Gon's side there.
Yeah, I guess so, a little bit. I mean, again, he only gets more hard-headed as the Clone Wars go on. So
You're just bored of being indoors all day.
yeah, I mean, so am I. So there we go.
Yes, there we go.
Yeah.
I actually found it funny. There was a line where Yoda would go like, "Police officers, we are not." And then I'm like thinking back to George's old quote of like,
Yeah.
"Oh, Luke Skywalker, he wants to be a police officer. That's kind of what the Jedi are."
Yeah.
So I found that kind of funny. I also loved when they were in Valorum's office and Palpatine was just like, "I wonder what this office would look like in red."
Yeah, I know.
I love it. Like he
Yeah.
just like, "I'm not a Sith Lord." He
Wink.
just looks. It's
Right.
like he's just enjoying. He's trolling.
Yeah.
Um,
That scene with the boots. What's going on with the boots?
that's true.
like spot ads and
Jedi
marketing
commercials. Yoda in a commercial. That'd be great.
That's- yeah.
Uh,
I'm sure it happened. When the Phantom Menace came out, I'm sure there were lots of.
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, there is. I mean, there is interesting. Like, yeah, they do technically endorse the Republic.
Yeah.
So there was that. But yeah, it's cool to kind of see. Very interesting seeing kind of everything just kind of being like
Mhm.
low key, like all seems. There's no wars. It's just kind of people doing their thing, kind of a situation here. Were you interested in any of the positions of the council? Like, did the book surprise you? Like, oh, I thought he'd be a little more like that, or I thought she'd be more like that, or with everyone kind of as you imagined them?
I mean, like we said last week, like you mentioned last week, they're kind of gloop shitters at this point. And we don't
That's
really
true.
know much in canon, at least, about any of them, or about a lot of them.
That's true.
So, yeah, no, they didn't necessarily surprise me. I will say, like I think what you're implying, John Jackson Miller, he set out, and in New York Comic Con, when he talked about this, he said the challenge to give each council member their unique voice and to make sure they're differentiated and consistent. And so far, definitely rising to the challenge of that, right? The different, it was Depa Balaba's on this undercover mission doing her thing, and yeah, it's a really entertaining book. I'm surprised how funny it is. There's some humor in there too. That I was surprised by. And then I mean, yeah, there's a whole council scene that's 2 chapters long. I'm there for that, right? So there's an episode idea. I'm production meeting right now. One in a few weeks, we're doing an episode on just Jedi Council scenes.
Here's my takeaway so far.
Yeah,
term limits. Jedi Council should have term limits.
Jedi Council term limits.
Yeah, then then Yoda can go back exploring. Like I feel like even Yao's like, I miss when cool I was.
Yes.
I got to do cool stuff. Now I just sit here all day. I'm bored.
Term limits as a percentage of their species' average lifespan. How about that?
Sure. I mean, like that must be confusing. Like
that would get confusing and probably unfair, but
maybe like 2 10-year terms, and there you go. You get 20 years.
Yeah, that actually okay. It's sufficiently long.
There, and then Yoda can go back to doing cool stuff. Yeah. I felt bad for Yaddle. Like he was like, I used to be cool during the High Republic. I used to do stuff.
Although, come to think that they're all term limited at this point.
That's true.
Executor 66 ends their term. Yes, I went there. Yeah, I went there.
That's true.
Speaking of the prequel trilogy, my second How I Met Your Mother, or second week in Star Wars thing. I'm on my 3rd rewatch of How I Met Your Mother, and there's of course some juicy Star Wars stuff in there. And in one of the episodes, I think season 7, they sit down and they watch the trilogy. And the episode is made and set in 2012. Mm-hmm. But for them, it's not the saga. It's not, the sequels hadn't been quite announced yet, but they were on their way to being announced. The prequels have been done, and yet here are these Gen Xers. For them, Star Wars is primarily the trilogy, and we know what trilogy they're talking about. That this is there, and they have this tradition every 3 years, and there's no reference to prequels. It's just the trilogy. It's just New Hope, Empire, and Return of the Jedi. And thinking about that, and I think a few years ago I would have gotten annoyed by that. Mm-hmm. But chatting with Dom about it, he was saying, yeah, this is just Gen Xers telling their story and their perspective. and
I mean, I
don't
don't
need
think
to
it's
get
just Gen
annoyed by
X.
it.
I don't think it's just Gen X's.
No,
I just
Gen
think it's
Xers and boomers and people that are
general
older than
audiences
me.
in general. General.
Yeah, but I think there's still, I mean, there's specifically a generational thing here, and to say these characters that they're a little older than me at that time. I mean, again, this is 12 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, even then, there was the young target audience. They were young enough by that point to say, well, that generation was still young enough to have shows marketed to them. Of course, we all relate to them a little bit, but it's the trilogy for them. And again, like a few years ago, I would have been annoyed by that, but now that we got this thing, this shirt here, we won the argument. The
Well,
argument's
here's my
over.
question: do
So
you think
okay,
the
let me finish
prequels
my
are
point. Let me finish my
okay?
point.
Okay.
That we won the argument. Everything.
Mhm.
Yeah, and just accept that that's just another generation's story, another generation's
Mhm.
approach to things.
Mhm.
And yeah, I mean, and again, Dom and I were meant talking about this and how now at Disney Lucasfilm, it's very much the saga. You don't.
Until
They're
they
not going to
retcon
let
it again. Until they retcon.
whatever, but they're not going to
Mhm.
let. I mean, they might let theaters
Mhm.
say, okay, we're just going to show the original trilogy. But for May the 4th, I mean, they're far more inclined to say, here are all 9 movies. Or, of course, for May the 4th, here's the one movie that came out 25 years ago. But yeah, it just times have changed. And it's interesting to note that, yeah, there's no need to get annoyed anymore. There's no need to worry about it because
Mhm.
it's a different world now. And I think if that was written, I don't think Dom pointed out, if How I Met Your Father was any good and was more successful, if that was written, maybe there would be more prequel content. Maybe there would be more about the saga or the sequel content or who knows what. I think there are stories, sitcoms, and other shows going to be coming up that will hopefully be more prequelist, definitely more sequelist. Yeah. So, I mean, I know originally Barney's Stormtrooper was actually a clone trooper because they were trying to really market Revenge of the Sith. But yeah, it was just an interesting thing to think about how we move on from different fights and different ways of thinking about things, so we can look back and be like, okay, fine. Yeah. So you
I,
had a question.
do you think the prequels are really now beloved, or do you think it's just more like social media makes them beloved? But if you ask anybody, random schmandom person, it's like, they're fine, or like, I didn't like them. Like I always wonder, it's like, how much of this is just social media and
Sure.
media culture
Well, and
just kind of,
also like the diehards who would
and the diehards.
go to Celebration and buy this T-shirt and fill an arena with
Yeah,
an Attack of
like
the Clones at 20. I mean, I will say though, it's fine. Or didn't like them. That's a better response than what they had gotten in 1999, 2002. Right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, if you're a sane person and didn't like the prequels, you probably went on with your life and don't look back on them as
True,
like you have a job. You have,
but
you're not grifting.
people,
Who don't.
I mean, if you call yourself a Star Wars fan, you're likely now, I think, I mean, you're likely to say, yeah, they're great, love them. I think it's more likely. This is me non-scientific poll, just presuming. Yeah, if you're a Star Wars fan who's active on social media, you're gonna say you love them. If you're at Celebration, you probably can say you love them or you like them, you appreciate them. If you're, a Star Wars fan, but of that generation and not in kind of the
A
core,
horrible person,
and
or
not a horrible person, yeah, you'll probably say, didn't care for them. But that's still, again, a better reaction than
oh god, yeah.
George Lucas ruined my childhood, which they might
Oh,
have said, and that's the thing. The same people might have said that
oh yeah.
20,
I,
25 years ago. So,
I've thankfully, I know. Here's a little optimism. I've
yeah,
I've heard people talk about that, and like they regret what they said. They still don't
sure.
like the movies and still don't think they're good,
Yeah,
but they're like, oh yeah, we definitely moved on from that.
sure.
I mean, they're like, okay, he's like, okay, that's good. Growth happens.
That's true.
Growth happens.
Well, there's that podcast, The Redemption of Jar Jar Binks, right?
Right.
And in that, there's one of the episodes is one of those guys who's early internet trolls, keyboard warriors.
Ah.
He's completely flipped and switched and is apologetic for everything he commented on. And
Does he like the prequels, or
I
does
think
he
he
like?
does. I think he likes them. You know. So I also finally got around to reading the Jake Lloyd article with his mom, or the
Yeah.
one about his mom. And I mean
That
that there's only one correct response, and that's compassion, understanding what
exactly.
he's been through. Interesting to note that the reaction to Phantom Menace wasn't a major part in his mental health struggles, but
Well, that's
couldn't have
good.
helped. Yeah,
Oh, I'm
but
sure.
couldn't have helped, right?
Oh
So,
yeah,
I mean, we know from at best it was, and so
mhm.
you know,
But yeah,
um,
I don't watch a lot of sitcoms because I don't really like sitcoms. But I know I do. I just like 90s sitcoms. So
yeah,
I don't know what people these days are talking about the prequels anymore, or what
mhm.
Star Wars is like outside
Yeah,
of me. Like I don't know. Like I don't know what like Star Wars outside of our bubble in terms of mainstream culture. Like, do people like make fun of that? Jedi? It's like oh, she's a clone, or do people just have like
mhm.
probably baby Groku's are all over the place?
Yeah.
Maybe, but like I don't know. Like I am very curious. Like what is modern American sitcoms these days pre Star Wars joke or
Yeah, it's
how they
interesting.
depict it? So like I don't know.
It's probably
Grogu.
either, yeah, it's probably either, that's the thing, it's probably is either original trilogy or it's whatever happens to be current at the time. Because I mean, if it's a Disney property of some sort, you know.
That's
So
something else. I'll to kind of play a little
right.
cynical, and then we can move on to
Yeah,
it's
sure.
like is his Star Wars under the mouse. It's like yeah, Disney will they be
Yeah.
careful. They will come after you if you feel like they're slandering.
Well, what I mean, yeah. But I mean, if anything, if it's a Disney property, they'll plug like they did, like whoever Fox or whoever was in cahoots with How I Met Your Mother in 2006, 2007.
That's true.
It randomly was a 501st clone there in Barney's apartment.
That's
And then
true.
later they changed it to a stormtrooper. But
That's true.
yeah,
Gotta promote that stuff. But yeah, that's.
so
I'm sure we can have a whole conversation about this eventually,
we could,
and
we
we
could.
should. But
But yeah, for now, let's move on quite quickly. Just very short. We didn't get to talk about it, so let's talk about it a little bit. Bad Batch season 3 episodes 10 to 12. Here's talking
dark
about beeline to the
fun
end. Yeah, Identity Crisis, Point of No Return, and Juggernaut. And yeah, like you're playing, this is some of the
and
darkest Star Wars.
Rampart and
And Ramp,
Rampart.
yeah, yeah. Identity Crisis, Point of No Return, and Juggernaut. Like you're implying, some of the darkest Star Wars I've ever seen. The Identity Crisis episode, and it's not like literally dark. It's kids getting kidnapped by this evil empire for experiments, right? And it's subtle. It's quiet. It's dystopian. It's
Evil.
crawling under your skin, like it almost. It's kind of like Andor in that way in the depth, but in an animated series involving kids here, the closest Nazi vibes we've seen, right? And so
Yes.
yeah, Amy, and it is, and it's dark precisely because it's so sanitized. It's so clean in that hermetically sealed Project Necromancer vault thing,
Mhm.
literally sealed in a vault. These kids are, and yeah, and just the slow, the Kevin Kiner or the Kiners doing their slow, uh, plodding soundtrack. With Emery and the animation, just so intense. And so that was specifically Identity Crisis. Yeah. Then yeah, Point of No Return with Omega and her sacrifice. That was again that was game character moment, great character moment, and yeah. Then yeah, Rampart showing up. Who knew? Who had bets on that?
I didn't. I always
No.
assume because every time we get rid of a villain into these Star Wars animated shows, they go away. Like
Yeah.
they barely return. So it's like, yay, full circle. The
Yeah.
original villain's back. So
But yeah. So what did you think of these episodes?
yeah, dark. Oh no, return. Like this is some Third Reich stuff right here.
Yeah.
Omega's sacrificed. Like dang, it's like okay, she's got to return to the place that she's afraid of, and so it's Crosshair now. They got to go back to the place. They got to confront their fear.
Mm-hmm.
This is the destiny of Jedi.
Yeah.
And Juggernaut, shocked to see Rampart. Shocked because every time, again, we
Yeah.
tend to get rid of these villains, replace them with new ones, and then the previous villain kind of don't really factor in anymore.
Wasn't that guy in Rebels, that Imperial officer that Ezra embarrassed?
I'm thinking more like the Grand Inquisitor and
Sure.
the two other Inquisitors, and then
Yeah.
Thrawn's the main villain now. Or Resistance kind of got rid of one character, the Baron character. But yeah, I love it. It's coming. It's all I've seen coming full circle,
Yeah.
and it's only heating up. Here's a question. I asked this on the podcast. I'll ask you.
Mhm.
One little tiny discussion. Do you think we will see the thing Palpatine was looking at in Episode 3? Do you think we'll see what's in the jar? What's in the jar by before the series ends?
I thought he was looking in the vault.
Yeah, but there
Like,
was
it's
but
the smaller thing.
he's looking in like the tube that
Yeah.
can, which is like I guess the vault
Right.
has multiple rooms.
Yeah, I
So
guess I was. Yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, we got. I mean, it's like a smoking gun.
right.
But I mean, it's the question, right? It's how far are they going to go in connecting this with Grogu and with Exegol? Explicitly, right? They've implicitly connected it. It's easy. It's obviously there. Just like they've fairly implicitly connected who that shadow clone is. They're just talking about tech, and they have the goggles, and then the guy shows up. So
wait for that reveal.
Yeah, I mean, that's not confirmed, but yeah, I mean,
but we see the tube. What's in the tube?
we might see it, but we might not know specifically or entirely what it means. We might have it might give us a clue about what it means, but unless it is, a golden house coat. I don't think so, but
yeah, I hope we do. It's like they showed that thing Palpatine's looking at whatever in the tube, and then we don't see it, and sort of like, are we going to go back to that, or are we going to? I don't know. I hope so. Maybe the finale.
It'll be in the finale. And again, I think we will. Right? It's not, again. I mean, it'll be like a Rise of Skywalker level editing problem, where like Finn about to tell Rey something, then we never get pick that up. You don't set that up without paying it off, is what I'm saying. So
I hope so. I hope
and it might not be this series. It could be the Omega Ventress series or whatever. But it's probably going to be this season. It's probably going to be.
I hope so. Because I feel like if you introduce something in a series, you should wrap it up in the series.
Yeah, I agree.
There's a difference between teasing a new series like with Ventress and then explicitly showing a tube. With something in it.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah,
it's interesting how they handle it. All right, again, a few quick stories here. We got the Outlaws trailer, and again, video games sort of counted paper-ish, but the game, of course, comes out August 30th. The reason we're especially bringing it up, and Joel, you wanted to bring this up, we have an idea of when this is set, and to see the paper to video game pipeline being very strongly intact. We see Crimson Dawn, we see Kira, we see Han and Carbonite. So clearly this is linked up with War of the Bounty Hunters and the Crimson Saga. And of course, as I'm saying, there's some speculation on when it's set in the timeline. And just excited to see again a Charles Soule story show up somewhere else. In the comic book story that those of us have been reading all the comics, and check out the Tractor Beam for that. And I think maybe Chris and I will chat more about that this week. We didn't have time last week, but we'll chat about it some more this week. This being linked up in the comics, probably more so than say Jedi Survivor, involving things we know about High Republic. It just has the aesthetic and the name High Republic and kind of the timeline, but not any of the characters or story or anything. So, except for implied Nile, but this was neat to see. I mean, closer against the Battlefront 2, tying in with the Aftermath trilogy and especially the Shattered Empire comic with the on Naboo, with Leia on Naboo and the N1s and all that. So, this one, definitely connected to that. So, Joel, when do we think this is set?
Well, I think this is set after War of the Bounty Hunters, but before one of the Hidden Empires, or maybe
Yeah.
even somewhere around it. Cause here's the interesting thing.
Hmm.
The comics mention the new bad guys. Did I write down who the new bad guys were?
I know you messaged it to me once.
Zarabesh. I did not write them down. I'm sorry.
Oh, like this, like another syndicate.
Yeah, the new syndicate people, the Zarabesh people, are mentioned as one of the many crime factions that are in war with one another in one of the Hidden Empire books, or the Crimson Reign. Both, probably one of both.
Yeah, in the crossover thing. Yeah,
right, and one of those. And they are the main bad guys in Outlaws.
Okay.
So my question kind of is, okay, these two stories happening maybe around the same time. What came first? Did Outlaws like, hey, we got this new crime faction called Zarabesh. I'm probably butchering it, but like, hey, could we hint this early in one of the comics? And they're like, sure. And then Charles Soule's like, hey, I'm doing this Crimson Dawn thing. Can you make sure Crimson Dawn's at least like a faction in this game, because that's kind of part of the world building of the post pre-Endor, post Empire storyline, or era. And they're like, okay, sure. So I wonder, we're kind of working in tandem, because obviously since Crimson Dawn's in it, it's like, oh, okay, this very much feels very much part of this particular era of stories, or at least Star Wars universe, where Crimson Dawn's active and there's a bunch of Underworld stuff going down. So yeah, it just makes me wonder, like, who talked to who first, and what came first, and who did what.
Right. My impression, at least from what Chris Abbott's been saying, excitedly sending me, that you could actually join Crimson Dawn in this game. I don't know if that's true.
There are factions you can help.
You can help them out, but I think the way this game works, from my impression, tell me if I'm wrong here, the more you help, it's a bit more open ended. Like, the more you help out a certain faction, the more you're a part of that faction to a certain extent. Or you could just choose to keep taking Kira's missions if you want.
Yeah, it's sort of like you get, like, I don't think you ever truly like join the faction, but you got like a good reputation. They know to call you when they.
It would be cool if you could just straight up join Crimson Dawn.
That would be cool. I don't know though if the story's far enough to have the battle of the Maxi Station.
Yeah, no, but
cool.
Well, I mean, like just like you're speculating, I would say it's in the middle. It's because it's not quite at Hidden Empire. I think it's more early Crimson Reign would make more sense. So very great to see the paper to video game pipeline intact, as usual. One last little bit to talk about here: upcoming The Rise and Fall of the Galactic Empire by Chris Kempshall, the historian, real world historian. I just got in the Star Wars and Politics book that he wrote, kind of textbook he wrote. So this one comes out July 9th. I wish it came out July 4th. Some places are saying July 4th, but no, it's coming out July 9th. That one, yes, July 4th, like you were saying, we were saying off air, you were saying July 9th is a Tuesday and books come out on Tuesday. So July 4th is a Thursday, you mentioned. So and from the perspective of Beaumont Kin. So you can dive in. What are you looking forward to in this one?
Well, I was lucky enough to listen to our friends, the Daughters of Ferrix, interview with Mr.
Chris Kempshall.
Chris Kempshall. And he brought up an interesting point, that there's a reason why Beaumont Kim is the person that the in-universe story is being written from. That he said something along the lines of, history books are an argument, and that Beaumont Kim is making a particular argument using these historical facts about the rise and fall of the Empire. What that argument is, I have no idea, but apparently there's a reason for it, and there's a reason why he chose this particular character. I did read the excerpt, and semi-spoiler, but not really. This does this in-universe take place after Rise of Skywalker and the Battle of Exegol, because apparently they found the information on Exegol in the documents and in the First Order's documents to make the book. So yes, very excited about that.
all that makes me more excited. Yeah, it makes me want to read this thing, because it's not going to be just a blow by blow summary of all these stories we already know, right?
Right.
We got to pay attention. It's going to be a lot of that probably, but we got to pay attention to what angle does Kemchal and through him Beaumont Kin, the character Shade. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Did you read the excerpt by any chance?
No, I didn't. I need to.
Oh.
I should do that, but also because the excerpt's kind of like a spoiler. That's the odd thing. It's sort of our spoilers in this, even though they aren't.
I mean, it's not a spoiler if it's officially released. That's my.
Sure, I know,
that
but
is my.
yeah, it doesn't count as spoiler. But I mean, I just still want to be as clean as possible. But for Living Force, I didn't read any of the excerpts, so there we go. Looking forward to that again, July 9th. Yeah, a real historian, and that's the thing is in Chris Hemshaw, he's had to do a lot of work thinking about what his own bias, in telling his way of telling the story of World War One in his academic work.
Yeah.
What argument does he make about that, about democracy, and who knows what else, and epochs, and who knows what else? So, yeah, it's spoken. It's the kind of thing someone who's actually in the field would really be able to say, really be able to talk about the bias being a feature more than a bug. That's the. I mean, I know bias is a bad word, but I mean that's the thing, and maybe I'll get to this slightly in our main topic a little bit, but the idea of writing again a blow by blow academic account of history. That's just this is what happened, and then this is what happened. First of all, that's never what history is, right? History is always cause and effect. These are the things that led to this, and this led to this, and led to this. But even then, before Middle Ages and earlier, it's always written, and we got to this point, and this point is either things are really great, and this is how we got to it, or things are really terrible, and this is how we got to it. And this is why things are terrible, and that things are terrible. Look how terrible things are. This moral argument they're making. I think, and I mean that's something that we've recaptured, I think, in a lot of ways in terms of the way we tell history, the way we write history, the way we say, for example, write the history of colonialism, and why who's responsible for the conditions on indigenous communities in Canada. How we tell Canadian history that way. Who's responsible for that? That's not a question that I can a dry, plain telling of the facts can answer. Because we're not just plainly telling the facts. Who's responsible? So yeah, definitely very curious to see what his premise, what his ideas. The one thing I did see is just the way I'm intrigued by the way it connects these three factions in the sense of, I mean, especially connecting the Clone Wars with the rebellion and how it's saying, I mean, something like a true World War One historian, right? World War One and World War Two, intimately connected to each other. George did that on purpose, right? George Lucas did that on purpose. The Clone Wars are intimately connected with the Galactic Civil War and the Rise of the Empire. I mean, we know that much, but to see that really spelled out will be great. So
I look forward to a Jedi history book in universe. Because you and I always debate about like how much does the High Republic actually affect the Jedi and blah blah blah. It's like, you know what, just write an in-universe book with that bias of like, okay, what is your thoughts on this? And then you get to decide for us what were the effects of the High Republic on the greater history of the Jedi, because that would be fun to read.
I mean, we were speculating, what would the next thing? I think Beaumont Kin and Chris Kemshaw could write this thing. Saying, and it would be a way of, after the Acolyte's done, I think, be a way of filling in all that time gap. At least for now. I mean, you could, and stories in there could retcon it. That's fine.
Maybe wait till Dawn of the Jedi also, so you can use that stuff.
Yeah, it's true. And so just to fill in, if you're going to make the argument, which I think you do and you can. I do. I want to.
Really?
Like I was saying, the contrast between in the Living Force between the Jedi of this time and in the High Republic. I think John Jackson Miller has that in mind. It'd be interesting to see someone. I don't know. I mean, it'll be hard because we don't have those stories, so they
Right.
have to somebody kind of sketching some sort of overall thing. I'd love that if they just kind of plotted it out and then said, if someone wants to write a story that doesn't quite fit with what happens, then okay, then they can change things and set off the course. But yeah, it'd be something. I mean, we have Dooku Jedi Lost. We'll have the Acolyte.
Sure, but I mean, like, actual history books, not narrative fiction, like story narrative.
Well, that's what I mean. Is they'll have to make up a lot of that story.
That's true.
So
That's true. That's true.
yeah,
I get. Okay, now I get what you're saying. Yeah, but
yeah. But also, I mean, I think after Phase 3 is done,
Oh yeah.
I have right here that kind of in-universe history of the higher or Phase 1. Yeah, and probably Phase 2. It'd be something else to do.
Good time.
Just of the High Republic.
Yeah, that'd be fun. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
Shall we?
Yes. So yeah, let's dive in. Do you want to start? Do I want to start?
I'll start.
You have a start plan, and then you'll throw it to me. All right, go for it.
All right. War. Ugh. What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all. All right. All right. War. Okay. Star Wars. What is Star Wars, right? It's got war in it. It has war. But this is the paradox of Star Wars, and I'll pass it over to you, Massey, to do your thing. Is on the one hand, I think we can all agree Star Wars is anti-war. I think we can all agree. I know that Luminous authors seem to.
Mm-hmm.
Yet there's never there is wars for the most part, at least of one of the maybe two of the three trilogies, are kind of justifiable because we're fighting the most evilest of evil factions. And what are we gonna do? Hug them out? Hug it out, Snoke. We're gonna hug you. We're gonna hug you until you stop being oppressive and dictator. There is almost a call to arms. Almost, join the rebellion, fight the Empire. So
yeah,
we're here to kind of dissect this interesting paradox and kind of, I don't know if we're gonna come to any conclusions, but just kind of figure out how did we get here and why. So Matthew, I know you got a thing. I'll go to toss to you now.
So I want to, and this might be, hopefully this isn't too much of a tangent here, but first off to say, we got the whiteboard and Team Luminous saying Star Wars not pro-war and what that's about. So the reason I'm diving into this is this history of just war theory. And what the point of that was used to determine whether or not a war could be justified. And ideally, and the ideal case for it would be to limit justifications and to say, okay, governments, you can only do this. It has to be governments, and I'll get to why in a minute. Governments, you can only do this if you meet these criteria. So where that originally comes from, and these are still in international law, that's still considered the case. And I'll get to the most famous recent in the last few decades example of this, but because like the jurisprudence about when it's not a war crime to go to war is part of the question there. And so this will come up in terms of how we assess the alliance, the restore of the Republic. Is that a just war? Just like the Allies taking on the Nazis, was that a just war? Where this is grounded in just war theory, it is grounded in because in the Western world it was the kind of this idea of a Christian consensus, and so grounded in how different because it's about life and death and killing legitimacy, and so we are taking into account what a theology of war and peace would be, and what what is God telling us to do or not. And in the Bible, and so in the Bible specifically, Yeah, it's more complicated. It at times is very realistic about war being just a feature of this world and this messed up world, and we're not going to agree, and we're going to have conflict over land and over power, and smaller factions trying to push their way up, and empire is going to march their way through. And in the New Testament, it's fairly consistent if you know what you're looking for, especially in the Book of Revelation, where the Roman Empire is considered the great evil of the time, and it's the glory of Rome is considered this evil antichrist to what God is bringing about. And so you have Revelation, you have this lamb who's slain, who gets crucified, gets executed, is actually putting a limit, putting a stop to all glorious empire and glorious warmongering empire. Jump a few centuries to St. Augustine's time, and late 5th century-ish. It's a different situation with the Roman Empire. There are, it's kind of like the way we have to account for capitalism, right? There are Christians who are just in the army because they got conscripted, or it's their job, or Christians in the Senate and bishops are having their authority. And I don't believe in such thing as a golden age. I don't believe in such thing as a dark age. Just I want to say it's just a different time to some extent. We always have to grapple with the reality of evil in our day. And how do we live? How do we go about our day? How do we go buy food? How do we go, how do I go buy clothing, even if it's made by slave labor?
If you make it past 5, you'll be fine. You can live to like 60, really.
There we go. So,
I'm serious. I've heard that that's actually true. Like the whole "you died young" in the Dark Ages is kind of BS.
Yeah. Like that's made up too. So, so Augustine has to say, okay, let's make this compromise for the sake of just living in the world as it is, and say, if you are a Christian in the army and you are ordered to go to war because otherwise you don't have a choice, the army is going to burn your family down, then you can go. Then and there are all these different criteria. So okay, if it's a proportional response to an invading force, if you're self-defense by a legitimate authority, and that's why how it developed, this idea of nation states developed, saying the legitimate authority, especially if it's centuries later democratically elected, that idea of a legitimate authority that can, again, proportionate response, this very limited plan. We're going to go in, we're going to remove this invading force, or we're starving, we need those resources, it's still iffy, why not trade for them or whatnot? But still, it's being realistic about people's inability to agree and to collaborate and to whatnot. It's not the ideal. It's just kind of realistic, if you will. But then we get to this funny thing called World War II. We get to,
I would say World War One first.
Well, World War One, yeah, we get to World War One and how all-encompassing that is, and how brutal that is. Then we get to World War II, and the way that war ends is a nuclear explosion, a controlled nuclear explosion on a whole city of civilians in Hiroshima. And that then turns to say, and one of the criteria is you do not harm civilians. And so, that's, well, at least definitely, because that's never a proportional response, because what did civilians do to you, right? And so start to think about that, start to, the world gets divided into these two imperial camps of the US and the Soviet Union. I didn't vote for the president of the United States, but apparently we're at war. We can drag us into war. Now that's interesting. This will bring me, I'll get to the most recent example of this. But yeah, nuclear weaponry, biological warfare, cyber warfare, just the way, there's no such thing as defending as not not ensuring civilians are safe, as we see human
War
shield,
is
etc.
war is weirdly becoming cleaner yet scarier at the same time. That's
Well,
another
what I
paradox.
mean is there's no longer a way to distinguish between civilians and um, enemy combatants. There's no way to distinguish, what's an actual aggressor state versus a terrorist organization, for example. And where's the line between civilians and combatants in a terrorist organization versus, very legitimate. I mean, here's the situation right now. You know, um, you know, that's the horror of what the IDF has done. And I'm going to go there finally. People are waiting for me to go there. The horror of what the IDF has done is they've refused to make any distinction between Hamas and Palestinian families who just want to live and survive. And so they've just wiped them all out. And it is a war crime. It is a genocide. It is, unjustifiable. But the question becomes, in our day and age, especially, is a just war actually possible anymore? And that's
Was it
actually
ever?
interestingly, when because just war theory just wasn't capable of containing and limiting state actors to a war. They used just war theory to justify it, as they always did. And that's the question. We need to go back in our history and say, these warring princes in medieval Europe, they used just war theory to say, I want that land over there. I want to enrich my coffers over there. Was that ever possible? And so there are different branches of Christianity that say, yeah, that was never case. Just war is never possible. War is never just. Even and so where the most, I think, the clearest example of where all this comes to a head is after 9/11 with the war in Iraq. The reason we have this famous image of Colin Powell going in front of the UN Security Council with the supposed evidence of weapons of mass destruction, he's trying to justify an invasion of Iraq. He's trying to say this is a proportionate response because they are an imminent threat. We are a legitimate authority. We're the United States government. A legitimate authority, meaning we've come to this world body and say we're going to, we want to get this coalition. We want UN support, UN sanction for this action. Everyone else knew the evidence was bunk. Everyone else knew that this is just, Donald Rumsfeld and his Project for a New American Century wanting to secure American oil rights. And so they didn't. And thankfully, Jean Chrétien kind of didn't go along with it. Pope John Paul II, he was the first to say, and he really thought about this and said, yeah, given the way biological warfare has gone with the anthrax scare and all that, given the way the world of states and state actors is just not really existent anymore, again, is just war a possibility anymore? Maybe it was in World War II, but is it, just given the way state actors and governments are going to use this theory not to limit but to maximize the possibility of legitimacy of going to war? It's just not possible anymore. And given, nuclear weaponry and again, biological weaponry. So yeah. And I mean, even, and then, Pope Francis saying all war is a failure. And,
But how does this link to Star Wars?
So yeah, that's the great question. That's an excellent question. How does it come back to Star Wars? Take my day job hat off. It speaks to that paradox, right? It speaks to this question, and I think with Andor is starting to raise it, especially. I'll get this off. Andor, General Draven, the darker side of that. definitely very much. I think that is the point of the Clone Wars, is because it's entirely Palpatine using this conflict to get to extend his term, change the constitution, and just declare the Empire. Even though we're cheering for the clones in these stories, we're watching these stories, we're cheering for the clones, we want them to succeed. It's told from this perspective. We know that is not possibly a just war. Can't possibly be one. We get stories of how the separatists, Andor, for example, shows stories, implies at least that the Republic was basically the Empire already. They make that very clear. That scene where his father dies, or someone else's father dies.
I think it was his father.
It was his father. His stepfather, yeah. Is already the Empire. These white-clad soldiers. That's the thing about these guys, right? Attack of the Clones ends with, it's such a poignant moment.
Oh yeah.
How both Attack of the Clones and Empire Strikes Back, they're connected in the sense that they end with these white-clad troopers marching across the galaxy, and we see, but the whole point, we have Bail Organa punching the whatever the balcony there. Like, we've already failed. Yoda, the shroud of the dark side has fallen, begun, the Clone War has. That war, even if we tell these fun, heroic, adventurous stories, that's something The Last Jedi. I love it so much. What am I going to do? Stand in front of the First Order with a laser sword?
He kind of does.
He does, but he doesn't cause any violence at all.
That's true, yeah.
And he does not. And what are we going to do? Kill what we hate? No, we're going to save what we love. And so...
and I just add, sure. That tweet I kind of got all the original kind of paradox for. Luke is kind of the only Star Wars characters I feel who's kind of straddled that line. Obviously Anakin does it. He goes the other way.
Yeah,
and Rey, kind of not really. She obviously, she helped Ben Solo, and that kind of helps her. But then Palpatine explodes, and then hooray, we saved the day. So it's like, a little bit. It's like Luke kind of is the only main Star Wars character so far who sort of straddled that line of we got the war stuff, and we obviously Luke on the Death Star too. He's probably gonna die if he just stays there. And just imagine the Emperor just zapping him constantly until they blow up the station. It's like, oh shoot, I wasted too much time. But Luke obviously is like, he does the thing, even though the military victory of destroying the station and maybe killing the Emperor is a done deal anyway. It just now happens in a more emotionally satisfying narrative faction. So I think that's just something about Luke I just want to point out there.
Yeah, although I do want to, I'm curious about his mother, because if you ask Kat Tabor, and this is her importing her real world perspective in clearly, but I'm curious to what she points out. Padme is not a pacifist, and I'm wondering. I'd be curious to hear what Kat Tabor means by that, because if by that she means she has no trouble picking up a blaster and definitely taking out some droids, but pointing it at Newt Gunray if she needs to.
She did in Phantom Menace.
Now we'll sign a new treaty. And again, I wonder if Kat Tabor has pacifism means something specific given her background. But it's she is. I'd be curious. I'd be curious to know, what Padme at war. She launches the fighters to the ship. Those. She's the queen. Those are her fighters that she's sending out to the Trade Federation ship. So,
I bet if you ask my theory, she'd probably be willing. I've always debated with people. I think she'd be like part of the rebellion, getting shipments to Saw Gerrera, counting him, calling him for missions. Like, hey, Saw, we gotta do something crazy. It's like we gotta do this thing, and we may have to blow up some Imperials. She'd be right there with them. In the early rebel cells organizing,
possibly. That's the paradox with the Rebel Alliance, right? Is even Mon Mothma comes to that point. It's just a very proportionate, very measured way of going about it, as opposed to Saw, who isn't. He doesn't care, right? He doesn't see his own actions as a failure, and that's the difference. That's a distinction. I will say, I mean, the thing about the Phantom Menace, what's going on there, like pacifism, and people believe in peaceableness. You know, they're often just critiqued as, well, what if someone comes in and is attacking your kids? You just let them attack. No, so a pacifist wouldn't say that. A pacifist would ask, why is someone desperate enough to come in and attack my kids? You know, what systems and structures in society are created to enable that to be an option at all, right? It's a deeper, wider thing. At least, I mean, there's different kinds of pacifism. So I do think, Padme, what we see, what she does in the Senate, she does actually approach that question and try and answer that question.
Well, here's an example, both
them.
from Clone Wars, Attack
Yeah.
the Clones, the lead scenes. You know,
Yeah.
Padme is willing to search a diplomatic solution with the Separatists. She doesn't want a
Yeah.
war. She is willing to seek
Yeah.
a coexistence. Obviously, that's not going to happen because Palpatine and Dooku are like, no, there's no way. We want a war. That's the point. But
she goes to visit Bina.
Yeah, but obviously the Sith do their thing.
Sure.
But Padme does want a diplomatic solution to the war because I think Padme, if she can see one, because obviously, I mean, she doesn't know Dooku's a Sith Lord and all that stuff. So I think compared to like when the Empire comes, I think I do not think. I mean, maybe my Mothma thought some stuff, but there's no negotiating with Palpatine here.
Right.
His negotiation is big planet killer that will destroy you. That is his negotiation right there. Surrender and die.
Yeah.
They're not even an or, it's just and die. So that's where I feel like sort of pacifism versus just, hey, this is the only option we have here.
Yeah.
Which I mean that's sort of another thing about these wars in Star Wars. Outside the Clone Wars, here's the interesting thing. I guess we can talk about the wars themselves. The Clone Wars is a war against two nation states in the Star Wars context, but for our sake, we're just going to use nation state. It is nation state versus nation state.
Effectively, yeah. I mean, they don't. I mean, the Republic doesn't recognize the Separatists as.
Well, I mean,
but they have their own institutions, right? I mean,
they're a nation state essentially.
Yeah.
The original trilogy and eventually the sequel trilogy, once the New Republic goes kaboom, is essentially nation state versus local insurgency.
Right.
It's an insurgents group, and insurgent warfare is. The context is different, and the the moral justifications are different, and I mean, you talk to revolutionaries in South America. They say, "Well, what are we supposed to do? The Somozas are gonna kill us. They're corrupt jerks. Batista's just gonna keep smoking and Godfathering it up. We got to do something." Russian Revolution, the Tsar is a complete moron. Look what he got us into. So I think, I mean, obviously those are a lot more messier in real world conflicts, but their context is different, and those are the different wars. That those are so far been the majority of the wars Star Wars has depicted that are local guerrilla freedom fighters versus oppressive empire.
I mean, here's the thing, and this might be able to salvage kind of what we're getting at, though, is the empire, like the Roman Empire. I had one prof describe it. It happened when the army went through. Now, the Galactic Empire can mobilize through hyperspace, but like we see, for example, with in the Tarkin novel or in Thrawn, that it's a military action against these planets, against these insurgent planets, or planets where they need resources, like on Lothal, they send
Mhm.
the army in to secure it, right?
Right.
The Moffs and the governors are military officers,
Mhm.
and so it is it is a warfare machine,
Mhm.
and it's called the Death Star for a reason. But even just the whole imperial governance, imperial expansionism, it is this warfare machine, and to say opposition to the empire is, I mean, it's kind of this weird, even violent armed opposition to the empire to stop it
Mhm.
is still George saying not pro-war. Still George saying the very exist or even the story, not just George, the story itself saying
Right.
the very existence of the empire is a failure of the galaxy.
Right.
There's a failure of nerve, and that is, I mean, that is again George's point in Revenge of the Sith, especially
Oh yeah.
in the whole prequel trilogy. I mean, with Luke's point, the existence of the Empire is a failure of the Jedi. I mean, they allowed it, right? And I think that's what Luke believes, whether or not it's what you believe. I
Right.
think it's what Yoda's doing over on Dagobah, right? At the height
Mhm.
of their powers, they let the Empire rise, or let the cities rise for the Empire and wipe them out. The Jedi are unable to be the guardians of peace and
Mhm.
justice in the
Mhm.
galaxy. Peace and justice. Justice meaning things that are fair and right and accurate,
Mhm.
which can involve punishment, can involve, they have lightsabers, they have these weapons. They're civilized, they're limited, but they are weapons. They're deadly. But peace, the guardians of peace in the galaxy, and the Jedi, somehow, for some reason, that we're reading about in these stories now, especially I think in Living Force is one of the explorations of this, Master and Apprentice, one of the explorations of this, the Phantom Menace, one of the explorations of this, no longer able to be the guardians of peace and justice. I do think the Nameless have a part to play in it as well. Why their light goes out, and yeah, it's just this large scale failure of uh, yeah, of the galaxy. Is there a way to say? I mean, it's almost a way to say, World War II is a failure of modern Europe. Period.
The failure to end World War One in a good way.
A failure, yeah. I mean, yeah, World War One again, yeah, a failure to, like the failure. I mean, because World War II is provoked by the way the end of World War One was still stuck in this idea of rigid alliances and states and state interests and state actors
Imposing a
carving
very
out.
harsh peace on Germany.
Exactly. And that's why, like, that's why they built this such harsh peace,
Mhm.
is because they were so caught up in having pressing the advantage that they gained, the Allies had gained, and instead of, and I know the Marshall Plan is complicated, but at least um in Germany, at least Europe hasn't had that kind of warfare, but now the Middle East does. Is the Middle East, it's a failure of of colonial powers again to I mean, that's the thing. I
Of
for the
colonial existence.
Israel Palestine war, I blame the British primarily.
I mean, we could blame the British for a good chunk of stuff in the Middle
That's
East, so
true.
I'm with you on that one.
But
We can blame
also,
the British for.
like I was saying, oil and American interests in oil. And so what I'm saying is, even if there's, and I think it's more complicated, right? I
Oh
don't
yeah.
think their existence is legitimate, but the alliance to restore the republic, we can say it's legitimate because it's a response to the galactic scale wide failure that is the empire itself.
That's the harsh thing about all these little insurgents groups, real world and fictional.
Mhm.
One man's lived freedom fighter, another man's
Right.
terrorist. You know, we still plenty of people love the Bolsheviks to this day.
Yeah.
Uh,
There are people who think Saw Gerrera was right.
yeah, I
And
mean,
people
yeah.
in the universe who definitely believed he was right.
Oh yeah, I mean, I would love to see some pro sequel post and/or people who still think that that'd be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, people think Dooku is right, even though I mean, that's a little bit more
Count
complicated.
Dooku was a visionary. I love that
I
line
mean,
so
yeah,
much.
but also, though there are also the people who don't realize, oh, he's secretly part of like the evil cis cabal that's trying to take over the universe. Um, but no, I mean, they thought, yeah, Dooku, he was Republic was corrupt, and he was getting us out of it. I mean, obviously, we the audience know the truth is he was a Sith Lord and part of Palpatine's schemes, and
Yeah.
it was Palpatine all along. Um, here's actually somewhere I want to get to because I've been wanting to talk about this one for a while. So High Republic is interesting for me because this is where I got a lot of conflicting feelings
Mhm.
because I'm gonna be honest, this is why I don't really like the Nile because they're just kind of evil and they don't have any redeeming quality. They're just like pirate gang of like, yeah, we take stuff because we're the Nile, we're cool, and now we
Yeah.
got this state, and we're pretty much just the Empire, but the Nile, but without uniforms and bureaucracy. We just like are rocking and rolling in our planets. Um, and so, the war against the Nile, at least as far as I'm concerned, or the conflict against the Nile, whatever you want to call it, there's no full scale war since the formation of the Republic. Full scale, full scale. Um, there's my out. Uh, you know, yeah, I I think the Jedi are the good guys because Nile aren't there's nothing redeeming about the Nile. They're not even like
Yeah.
doing anything good to help. At least with like the Separatists, as much as I got my issues with always seeing, General Grievous and his evil plot to destroy the Jedi. It's like, we saw some Nita Von Terrys. We see like,
Yeah.
yeah, or some even the bad batch separatist governors are like, yeah, we just want to keep our planets independent from, we want to have the freedom to do what. But there's
Yeah.
certainly
Yeah.
that kind of like legitimizing aspect of
Yeah.
what the separatists had, even though the
Dooku was a
main
visionary.
all the main leaders are
Yeah.
all evil and psychopath like Grievous and New Gunnery. But like the
Yeah.
Nile are just pirates. Like I don't know why
Yeah.
anyone outside of emo angsty teenagers would join the Nile, and it's like they're not even saying like, and it's not like they're saying the Republic doesn't help the poverty-stricken planets. I mean, if anything, the Republic's too good. Like what? Why? Like who? Like outside of like just who's joining the Nile? Like what legitimate grievances would you have to join the Nile? I can't think of any, and that's why I love the Path of the Open Hand because at least they kind of have a bit more of a yeah, I could see why. It's like, yeah, these people who make things float. I don't know if I trust that. But with the
Yeah.
Nile, I'm like, oh yeah, kick their butts. They're no bueno. They're no good.
Well, that's the reason phase 2 happens, right? And we get it. And that's the reason we're told it in that order. And we go back, the DNA of the Nile is in Martyr Row. She is the mother of the Nile, right? Everything she believed about the Jedi, she continued to believe. It's just that instead of when she saw that the open hand wouldn't actually bring about the change she wanted to see, she then transitions into the closed fist. And that moment where they become the path of the closed fist. And the moments where she gets this resolved, I mean, some of the juiciest storytelling. I do think we're going to see more. I think we're going to actually get more answers to your questions about the answer being, what is it about the Nile that makes them more compelling, as makes them more attractive as wanting to sign up? Partly, yeah, to rock out and just do whatever the heck you want. But I also think we're going to get more about their connection to the path of the open hand and the path of the closed fist. And
I hope so.
what Marta's influence through that time would be. There's a way of communicating this collective rage, right? This collective angst, and we see a lot of young people. It turned into good, turns into actually, a peaceful protest, declaring that things aren't acceptable. We can also see it in terms of growing. I mean, effectively into a terrorist faction, right? But again, you're right. It's what are the legitimate grievances with the Republic? Maybe because that's what I saw, for example, in rural Alberta, the grievance people had about the government in Edmonton was that it's in Edmonton. you know, although this big city of 1 million people, we're a town of 6,000 surrounded by farmland. Who are those folks to tell us what to do, right? That is a big theme, a huge theme in Star Wars, right? Who are these folks out in over in Coruscant to tell us what to do? They don't know us. It's just that, and this gets into the Clone Wars comes up. They were, I was really stunned, really startled, not stunned, just struck is the word, in how it just shows the example. This is Alberta politics for you. Just deep dive here, deep cut into Alberta politics. I spent about a year there, but the oil companies in Calgary were more trustworthy than the government bureaucrats in Edmonton, but the provincial capitals in Edmonton. But all the oil companies are based in Calgary. At least because the oil companies in Calgary could go to these farmers and say, "Hey, we want to." They go put a bunch of wells in your farm. Here is X number of dollars for the rest of your life, and we'll work with you to make sure your farm isn't affected by it. But it's oil companies, and and then we have environmentalists in Edmonton saying, "Hey, but carbon tax and all this stuff," and things that us city folks think are good and great and need to actually transition to renewable energy that's good for everybody. But I think the specter of an empire emanating from Coruscant, of an oppressive empire emanating from Coruscant, because that's baked into the American founding myth, this empire in London. Who are those folks in London to tell us what to do? We're gonna chuck their tea into the sea. Who are these folks? We're gonna then move over. Even before that, right? The Puritans, what's the crown to tell us what to do? And then the Puritans go. It is part of this thirst for independence. Even legitimate or not. That's the question. What are you going to do? What for your freedom? Is always it's this is a very American story. Star Wars is a very American story, and it plays on, and it's interesting. It's a very liberal American story, and so that independence is questioned to some extent, to a large extent, but not in terms of with Luke and the rebellion. With the Nihil, it is, and that's the thing. And that's what's so funny and so weird. And the weirdest part of the High Republic is the Republic. Is like you saying how benevolent and good it is, and how humanized Lena So is, for example, and Keon Greylark. Both of their sons are in trouble.
And I like Greylark's story more.
And so it's it's this funny outlier. Where is this fear and this angst against that Marta? Where does Marta get it from? Where does the mother get it from? Alicia get it from? Just to say, lastly, is there something even further in the past that leads to that? The real world answer is it's telling a story about our own psyche, collective psyche, as North Americans, is Western folks. But anyway.
I would hope to see, since we're going to Naboo soon, which I'm excited for.
Yes.
Yay. Is like, okay, now control Naboo. How? Right? Like, with all the evil governments, it's like, again, like Dooku, the planets he controlled that weren't occupied like Rylos, they wanted to be part of the Separatists. Like, we're free from that corrupt republic. The Empire, obviously, yes, there's imperial occupation, but, it's like law and order and, yay, fascism, all that good stuff. Nihil, it's like, how are they controlling Naboo without a lot of resistance? Are they just like guns ablazing? It's like, that's, obviously, obviously, that's why I think the Nihil state is so fragile. It's going to just collapse on its own. It's pretty much just a crazy town. But, it's like, how are you controlling it now? Like, is it just everyone's just so like, we're not used to all these people with
Mhm,
guns around and who are very organized. It's like they just couldn't get their resistance up in time. Um,
mhm.
although I will say that's also that's like my secret sequel trilogy headcanon is that the First Order never really controlled a good chunk of the galaxy. They
Yeah,
had a lot hard time maintaining it. Although the difference with the First Order is like they seem a lot more organized and
yeah,
bureaucratic. But it's like the Nile, it's like
yeah,
Marcion Road, just like we're gonna party and shoot people.
yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, how are they controlling Naboo for this long? You'd think there'd be more uprisings or something by now.
Here's my theory, and where's my mind goes is,
Hmm.
if the Rebel Alliance is military in the name of peace for the sake
Hmm.
of peace, I
Hmm.
wonder, I mean, the Cold War was called a Cold War.
Hmm.
Uh, it was military. It was political alliances, NATO, um, U.S. presence in Vietnam. Even presence on Hawaii, for example, in Hawaii statehood and whatnot, um, and Alaskan statehood
Hmm.
for the sake of war, right? I do think Markian is going to see Eurostaros. I haven't fully. I haven't finished the Fight of the Storm. I need to do that. So I don't quite know how far things get there, but Markian's going to use Gira's kind of diplomatic endeavors despite herself, or what she had set up as a more diplomatic arm for the Nile to say, I need this planet because he needs the Santekas. Probably something to do. Well, definitely needs the Santekas. Something definitely to do with the paths and the way through the storm wall and their technology. Just the way, not well, I guess Zylan Graf and his technology, but also who is Zylan working with? The mother of not Jordana, Afi
I don't,
Hollow,
I don't remember anybody.
whoever developed the Stormwall technology. I forget her name, but like he had to play nice, and I think for the sake of making sure the Sentekas are able to provide their technology, I think Markian's going to play nice a little bit. Um, but also, I mean, Naboo. Who else is on Naboo? Yeah, the Nayberries are from Naboo, but so are the Palpatines. See what happened there. So
I mean, I see that. I mean, like, is Marcion making secret alliances with these local governors, or like,
I
you
think so.
think?
I think that might be the case, and then I think he might be open to some new strategy here.
I mean, we'll see. I'll just
Mhm,
say I didn't see any of that in the book, but
mhm.
maybe in the next adult book.
Well,
So we'll
that's what I
see.
mean. In it's going to be that's where we're going in Naboo, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
that's true. So
the Jedi and Nerve book.
I'll be curious if like any of the houses have joined with the Nile, because, and then I want to see why did they join? Like, what do these rich I mean, what do
Mhm.
these rich aristocrats get
Yeah,
out of this? At least again with Dooku, I kind of had to get in. Obviously, that Palpatine's always doing that kind of
yeah.
manipulative stuff, but yeah, but that's the thing. Also, but again, gotta go back to the original point. Um,
Mhm.
uh, as of now, gonna be honest. Yeah, we gotta fight the Nile. I
Yeah.
don't think Marcion's Rose interested in negotiating. I think we gotta kick his butt. Um,
Well, the nameless are, I'm the Jedi. I can't let the nameless keep going.
yeah, we gotta figure out what to do with the nameless. So
Mhm.
yeah, it's like that's kind of another black and white kind of war, and then
Although,
obviously,
so
mm,
I just want to say, the
mhm,
nameless. I'm hoping, you that's the thing. A peaceable solution might be possible. A peaceable imagination, and that's the thing, right?
oh,
And kind of philosophers of peace and theologians use this word imagination to
mhm,
be able to imagine, like we see with Padme and Mina, to be
mhm,
able to imagine the possibility of a peaceable solution, peaceable response, right? Yes, I think in some cases it's going to require non-force sensitive folks to go in front of the Jedi and to protect them, and
mhm,
to actually, like we see, I think a little bit in Defy the Storm and in Escape from Valo, where we have other characters, or even in we have Tesseract in the High Republic comic, uh, helping take out. I guess there's a nameless there on that planet, but maybe that But I really hope Reith, my guy Reith, uses reason, uses science, uses kind of the Star Trek solution. That's the weird thing. Use the Star Trek solution to say, oh, these nameless, they come from this planet where everything is peaceful and harmonious, and it's that they're hungry. They're starving to death. Of course they're going to eat. If we actually find where they're from and we can bring them home, we can deal with the problem in a way that doesn't involve killing them. It involves actually feeding them and keeping them, ensuring they're flourishing and they're still alive. So,
oh yeah, I mean, we kind of have to figure out what the nameless are all about.
Yeah.
Are they a malevolent creature, or are they just a victim of Marcion Rowe
Yeah.
and the mother, kind of manipulating them for their own humanistic benefits? And then we've never actually seen one of these wars, but they exist. Every Jedi versus Sith war. I don't think there's much nuance there. I think we kind of know who the red blade lightsaber people are not the friendliest of folk. I mean, okay. So here's the interesting thing: you can make it flawed, but you can make it flawed in the sense that, oh shoot, I mean, we might have, like the Revan's War, Jedi Council kind of screwed the pooch and didn't get involved in the Mandalorian Wars, and that led to Revan splitting off and doing his thing, and then he fell to the dark side. So it's like, oh shoot, we're paying for that problem. So there's a failure of us not acting, and then we get a Sith Lord. And then
failure of not going to war.
Failure of not going to war. And then obviously there's the Exar Kun kind of Anakin thing of like, oh shoot, we let one of our students fall to the dark side. Exar Kun's case is like, that guy was kind of always a jerk. We kind of gave someone who was a psychopath already power. Shoot, we should be more limiting with our students. So I guess in some ways, it's like failure of kind of not realizing, oh shoot, this guy's dangerous. We should probably do something, and then the Sith Lord comes to power. Or in Luke's case, kind of not maybe giving Kylo or Ben Solo the attention he needed at the time, and then that lets Snoke kind of be his best buddy. So, I mean, that's how you get the nuance. But obviously, when a Sith Empire comes, you gotta fight it and stop it.
They got the red lightsabers. What can you do?
I know.
Well, especially how we know how those red lightsabers happen, right?
Yeah. Not pretty. So, yeah. This is the weird thing about Star Wars. I mean, maybe I'll be curious to see what kind of wars post TROS comes up with, and will it be a little bit more clear cut, or will we get something a little bit more of that? Why are we fighting? Why are we doing this? Like the Clone Wars was to a certain extent. Although in that case, because the Sith Lord was manipulating everything, so I'll be curious, because again, that is the tightrope of Star Wars. Right now, it's to not be pro-war, but also, you know what? Sometimes these wars, they gotta happen.
I mean, it's to be realistic about the reality of warfare in our world. It's also to be realistic about the reality of governments in our world. Again, I think Andor is showing, and Saw Gerrera is showing that. I would be really interested to see if in the Rey film the big bad isn't some violent opposition, right? If it isn't a war situation, a military situation, if it isn't this sort of similar sort of opposition to some great evil institution, right? And if you consider the Dial an institution or a faction or whatever, you know what I mean? If there's something else entirely, if it's political, one of the things, Kazuna, not Kazuna, his father, Senator Ziono, he has an antagonistic role, but I mean that's the wild thing. He's the one saying, Hera, what are you doing? Taking these Republic resources out there on a military action against this enemy we don't believe exists, right? Now that's another theme throughout Star Wars. That's a theme that you that we see. Well, we see Leia with the First Order, right? We see Mon Mothma and especially Jin and Radis with the Death Star and the Death Star plans. And so we see with Avar and Vern, at least in Phase 1, Avar, Vern, and Keeve saying and Jorah Mali initially let's take the fight to the Nile. And others are like, let's be more cautious. That's another theme, interestingly enough, in a series that's not pro-war, but to actually say, okay, the specific situation is more complicated. Once we're in the failure, what do we do? How do we respond? Right. My last question then is, what the acolyte? What we have that red lightsaber. We don't know what that means. We don't know who that is. What are the Jedi supposed to be like in this time? Are they, the actual, like I mentioned before with the trailer, the actual clothing is this transitional thing where there's some of the gold, there's some of the nice patterns, but it's also moving towards more of the farmer garb that we see. Because even the brown action clothes in the High Republic era, they're still nicer. They're still more stylized. It's just they're just more functional. Is the acolyte, is supposedly the dark side character, is it a bit more complicated? And that's the thing, is it's 2024. This show is coming out in 2024. Do we believe in objectively good knights in shining armor anymore? Do we need those stories? And maybe we do. Maybe we need those stories. Maybe we need, we need Star Trek, for example, to be aspirational. Do we need Star Wars to be so aspirational in the same way? We have the High Republic Initiative telling us this story. We have stories, of Jedi saving the day, including with a laser sword, including, right, Luke in the failure, in the moment of this kid, Grogu, he's in danger by Moff Gideon. He has to go in and take it. He takes out all those droids, thankfully, as opposed to later when he's taking out the First Order. But he's channeling some dark side vibes there. He's got the hood down. He's using the Force to destroy these droids.
At least they're droids.
But the Gamorreans weren't droids, and he chokes them, and I don't know if he kills them. I'm Return of the Jedi, but
that's I won't get into it, but there's a weird thing about people are actually have always questioned if he actually is choking them or not, because that's actually debatable. That's actually a bit of a debate because of some stuff in the script.
Sure. Anyway, you were going to say so much of stuff.
Yeah. So, well, here, I mean, that's the question: is do you believe in objective morality or not? I know some people who do. Like, good and evil are a thing. There is objective morality, and to be fair, I do think we gotta have some standards, because otherwise, one of us can go on a killing spree. And it's like, I just want to do it for fun. But also, I guess the question we have to ask ourselves about the factions and the story, this is where things get weird, because real life is complicated. Is what are you guys really fighting about, right? Yeah. Like, what are you really? What is your true fight about? Because Palpatine could say law and order and the peaceful galaxy, but we all know what Palpatine's ultimate objective is, and that is unlimited power
through unlimited warfare.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, I think, and this is, I think, is a fan thing. We have to maybe stop believing what the character says their motives are as objective fact. Which is funny, because just talked about objective morality. But again, look at Thrawn. Thrawn's like, he never once says, unlimited power. He just like, for the Empire, for the security of our galaxy. Yeah. But I think if we really analyze it, we know that what Thrawn's fighting for is an objective wrong in the Filoni stuff. Yeah. For certainty. Again, the Nile are pretty open what they're fighting for. They're just fighting for the right to party and trash everybody's. That's why I like the path of the open hand and the separatists to some extent, because what they think they're fighting for is somewhat more justified. It's just that their leadership is obviously not being truthful. Like it's like Dr. Doom's like, I am fighting for your right for independence and for a
Mhm.
free galaxy. And then he turns off that one post turns on the holocron. It's like, yes, Lord Sidious, everything is going as planned for the dark side.
Yeah.
So I do think that one thing about all these wars is we have, and I think just in terms of good fan analysis, and we'll probably make this our last point,
Yeah.
is we have to be good at analyzing. Okay, this is what they're saying, but are what they're saying really what they're doing? And we can talk about all the problems of the Jedi all the live long day, but most of the time, what the Jedi are fighting for is normally what the good thing is. Be it
Yeah.
most Jedi characters do, and if they're not, they normally turn dark side, like Paul Krell, who eventually does just say, "You know what? I'm a dark sider now. I'm not
Yeah.
even a Jedi." So you know, there's never been
Good old Krell, as I put
or
in the
or
chat.
or Dagon.
Yeah.
Dagon like
Yeah.
eventually like he doesn't even care about the Jedi anymore. He's just like, I'm going to make these hardcore force sensitive empire my own. So again, I think we got to be smart and like, okay, this is what they're saying. What are they
Yeah.
really fighting for?
And I mean, this gets me to the Gray Jedi thing, right? In
Which,
a way, because there are folks who take Palpatine's thing at face value. Uh, the the Jedi, the Sith, they're all just about keeping power, maintaining power. Um, the whole gotcha, and Anakin. So the Sith just want power, and Palpatine's the gotcha. Oh, the Jedi don't.
mhm.
Um, Anakin is a self-insert character for a lot of folks in that moment because good and evil and morality can be a trigger word because they're used to what they're used to are our church institutions and government institutions
Mhm.
saying this thing is morally good and then this thing is morally evil, but then church institutions especially
They let us
acting
down.
letting it down or acting completely contrary to what they've claimed to be good
Mhm.
and respectful and right way to treat people,
Mhm.
um, or using that language to mask and justify right, what their behavior is, and so um, they don't trust any kind of authority that claims to say what is good and evil, and so they kind of negating any kind of collective discernment, common understanding about that. And so then they say, yeah, the Jedi, any claim to good is itself evil. And they won't say that because good and evil, they kind of get caught in their own web of good and evil. It's why folks want the Jedi to themselves, the origins themselves to be evil and the Sith to be this repressed minority. Um, because real world concerns here. I think yeah, like you said, got to be careful of importing that kind of idea. Careful not to say that, I mean, again, the Gray Jedi thing, you know, the way I want to go is to reject the Jedi, and therefore I gotta embrace the dark, and that balances this equal thing between dark and light. But no, it's the shroud. Yoda says the shroud of the dark side has fallen, begun the Clone War has. The Jedi are in the midst of this galaxy-wide failure.
Right.
They haven't fully fallen to the dark side. They aren't themselves an evil institution, but they're in the thrall of the dark side at that point. And uh, we need to be clear at that point to follow the Jedi into leading this Clone War is to uphold them. That's again the tricky thing. We're cheering for them in these stories, but ultimately they're being led down this path that we should not want to follow, not because they're the Jedi claiming to be the light, but because they're succumbing to the dark. And so we have Qui-Gon, we have Ahsoka saying, "No, I'm out." um, we have Barriss, but again, as we'll see,
She
Barriss is
falls
going
to the dark side pretty much.
exactly right. Anakin falls to the dark side. Quinlan almost falls to the dark side.
Pretty much.
That's another thing I'm excited to see is how Barris negotiates all that and processes and what she recognizes all that. It's going to be this prodigal son kind of moment of,
Or
I've become the very thing I swore to destroy.
or we always talk about Thrawn in the books versus Thrawn
Yeah.
in the movies, but even I guess in the Filoni show he's talking about security of the Empire and
Yeah.
the galaxy, but he's on the dark side. He's working
Yeah.
with evil witches. He's working with the Empire.
Yeah.
He's not making any jest. He's still like my solution is restore the oppressive system that dominated the galaxy for 25 years and built the evil Death Star.
Yeah.
He can say, "Well, I'm not going to build an evil Death Star because that's stupid." But he's not doing it because of any moral reasons. He just thinks
It's a dumb idea. Yeah.
it's just like I have better ideas for my resources. Let's build a
Yeah.
navy. We'll just attack more efficiently. So yeah, and I think that's something a lot of fans still don't want to have to kind of. Some of us,
Mhm.
not all of us, but some of us don't want to admit is that I love using this word. Star Wars has ontological good and evil.
Yeah.
It just does.
Yeah.
It kind of. I do think honestly, Star Wars does side on there is such a thing as objective morality, or at least
Yeah.
Lucas's Star Wars did. I haven't. To be fair, I haven't really seen any Star Wars that really hasn't. I mean, maybe it makes certain things complex, but at the end of the day, Andor's like Empire, bad, really bad. So
Empire worth dying for, worth killing.
yeah,
Against.
yeah, fight the Empire. That is
Mhm.
Andor's mom's last message.
Yeah.
So yeah, war. What's it good for? Absolutely nothing, and it sucks. But Star Wars has it.
It's a failure of all of us, and that's just it. But that's the thing is, this is how liberty dies, though. A
Right.
safe and secure society with hundreds of laws. So, yeah, it is a reality of our world, sadly. And Star Wars is realistic about that. So go ahead.
And most of the good wars in Star Wars are normally reactions because there was a bad war beforehand. So yeah, there's how Star Wars is anti-war. It's like it's more just people having to clean up the mess of the last generation.
There we go. That's kind of fixing the failures, fixing the mistakes.
Yes.
Sometimes. All right. Is that a good place to wrap up? We're good.
I think that's a good place. 2 hours as usual.
Yeah, there we go. That is a good place to wrap up. Yeah, we didn't land on any sort of great panacea solution to this. Just it's Star Wars. Unlike Star Trek, Star Wars, we need Star Wars to be realistic about these things. We need Star Trek to be aspirational. We need Star Wars to be realistic. I will say one last thing. Again, I'm going to keep bringing this up every single time. There is a conviction, and for it to be authentically Star Wars, it has to inspire young people to bring good into the world, and whatever that is.
I remember just people, because I want some middle-aged or older Star Wars stars.
I know, but like specifically young impressionable folks. I mean, I think that's at least primarily is the thing. Yes, it could be lots. Anybody, bring anybody, inspire anybody to bring good into the world, but above all, young people who are learning and growing, and we're all learning and growing, but stepping out into the world for the first time, which path are you going to choose and inspire them? There is a sense of which path they're going to choose, and that there's a good path and a wrong path, a right path and a wrong path. And so whatever Star Wars story that is, and I think there's still the commitment to doing that, regardless of what creative you are. So there's that. That's a good point to wrap up. Thanks for joining us, everyone. If you let us know what you thought. What do you think? What do you think about what makes for a legitimate war in Star Wars? What does Star Wars have to say about war? Is it pro-war? Is it not pro-war? How will I not be pro-war, even if it has Star Wars in the title? Comment below in the comment boxes. These aren't going anywhere. Let us know on social media. Also, please do like and give this video a like and a share, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Joel, great conversation as always. Where can they find you on the internet?
You can find me at JID 2021. Again, JID 2021 on Twitter. You can find me at IonCannonPod. Hey, I'm finally getting it.
You're getting it. There we go.
I'm getting it. I'm trying to remember. At IonCannonPod, EYEONCANON on
Yeah,
Twitter, where I will post stuff every now and then. And of course,
EYEONCANONPOD.
yes.
Greg is great guy, different account.
Oopsie, my bad.
Yeah.
Yes. And of course, you can find me in the Star Wars Underworld Discord, where we are chitting, chatting, gaming, all sorts of fun stuff.
There we go. I guess is there any plans coming out?
Not this week, but maybe next week we'll do a game night. We're still on Jedi Adventures. We probably will be finishing that up by the time Acolyte comes finished, and we'll go straight to there.
Speaking of videos to watch, didn't you write something? Did you help write something?
Did I help? Oh, right. Yes. If for anybody listening, go to Culture Slate YouTube. Go to the Culture Slate YouTube channel and check out the new series Sketched Out. Episode 1 just premiered on Friday. It is a online mini series about 4 nerds of various shapes and sizes and ages talking nerd stuff, and it's hilarious. And there will be a Star Wars episode coming on around May the 4th, I believe.
It's very relatable. Let's put it that way. Again, speaking of self-insert characters, it was good. I saw the first episode.
Oh, good. Thank you.
Good job for everyone involved. The actors as well, especially. The writers, everyone involved. Good job.
Thank you.
There you go. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at NEUG485, Instagram and Threads at MNEUG1138. Probably you got Star Wars, you got church stuff going on there on Twitter, soccer stuff, all that jazz. At IonCannonPod, EYEONCANONPOD. We're also on Instagram and Threads there as well. I'm trying to think Threads, Instagram. What have I done recently? You got to get back on to using those more, but definitely on those socials there. Of course, at the SWU, right here on the YouTube channel. Check out Tractor Beam on Wednesday and the flagship on Thursday. Next week we are doing another kind of storytelling deep dive, talking about the narrative impact of character cameos. What happens when a character we already know and love comes into a new show, and how to balance that and be careful about that, and instances about that. So it looks fun, should be good. It should be another good Iron Cannon storytelling deep dive like we did sort of tonight as well. Woo! So that was fun. Tonight was interesting conversation. We don't have a solution for war. It's just a failure. But all we can do, we can talk about it. We can.
Sorry, folks. Podcast can't solve the problems for you. We wish we could.
But we can talk about them. We can talk. All that.
That's up to you to fix the problems.
Yes. Well, Americans head to
the world.
I mean, but also specifically you Americans better get your vote out.
That can help.
It can help a little bit. It won't help too much, but it'll help a little bit.
Yes.
Fun times. Anyways, catch us doing that next week. Same bat time. Same Minoc time. Same Minoc channel. 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. But until then, Joel, let's blow this thing and head home.